Hey, welcome to my kitchen. I wanted to show you guys how to do some cooking. Cooking is extremely easy, and believe it or not, you're gonna have to do a lot of it. And I'm here to simplify it. The first thing that you're gonna need is a fire pit. Believe it or not, fire pits cannot burn down wood, so you don't need to encase it. You don't need anything special. You can throw it right into a wooden base, doesn't matter. It will not spread fire. The main way that you're going to be cooking food is cooking pots. Cooking pots are extremely easy to make and just requires a little bit of pottery. You can see cooking pot right here. You click on it, you just follow the cubes, you get them made, and once you're done, you'll get a raw cooking pot, and you just throw it into a hole in the ground with some grass, sticks, and firewood. Then you light it, and you gotta wait a little bit. But once you're done, it'll be cooked up, and you'll have a cooking pot ready to go. Now, there is a couple other things that you're probably gonna wanna make while you're doing this. Bowls. I recommend that you make extra, because the chance of you losing the bowl is pretty high, and it would be a shame for you to have food but not be able to eat it because you don't have a bowl. Cooking pots are super nice to have in bulk as well, not only because you wanna be cooking multiple things at once, but because there's some things later on that can actually ruin your bowls, so you can't cook with them anymore. Crocks is the main way you're going to be storing most of your food, so make sure to make a whole bunch. On my world, I have an entire shelf of extras, a whole bunch on the ground, and a ton stored away. And honestly, if you keep up with your food production, you might want way more than me, so make sure to make them. If you plan on doing any liquids, a clay jug might be really good for you. It can store more liquids in a bowl, and you can take it with you. So if you make something like wine, it is incredibly nice to have, which we'll be getting into this later, and most of the stuff in here. This is known as a cellar, which is used to keep your food lasting a lot longer, and all it really is just a room in the ground that light can't get to, and it's made out of materials like cobblestone, so your food can last a lot longer. If you hover over any of the items, such as the vessels, you can see its perish speeds, and vessels are the best for food. However, they don't hold that much compared to something like a chest, but the perish speed is worth using these for, and I highly recommend it. However, that being said, you don't need to be putting crocks into vessels. You can just leave them on top of shelves. Shelves are insanely easy to make. They're very cheap. You throw them onto the wall, and you can throw your food onto it. However, this should mostly only be done for crocks. If you have vegetables, other kinds of meat, mushrooms, stuff like that, that should all go into the vessels. Crocks are insanely cool. As you can see, this will last 46.2 years right now, but it is sealed. If I uncrack the seal, it will now only last for 5.4 years. The way that you seal it is you put it into your hotbar, and you can place fat next to it to seal it. This is good for long-term storage, and that's how you'll be preparing for winter. However, there's another way that you can seal it, so I'm gonna crack it again, and this time I have honeycombs. You get honeycombs from beekeeping, which I have a whole nother video on it. But if you do that, and you can right-click a bucket, it'll drop some honey into there, which is great for cooking food. That's what all these are. They require honey and is immensely nice. But the reason why we're doing it right now is for the beeswax. Beeswax can completely replace the fat and can seal your crocks. And if you start up beekeeping, you'll pretty much have unlimited honeycombs. So you won't have to be burning through fat every time you're trying to seal everything. While we're on the topic of winter prep, stuff like grains last an insane amount of time. However, flour lasts about half the time. It's still 14 years, which is a bit ridiculous. So it's amazing for winters. You get a whole bunch of it, you just leave it in a vessel, and you can cook it at any time you want, which we'll get into that later. Stuff like vegetables also last quite a while, so you can just leave that into the vessels and cook that when it's needed. However, stuff like meat only lasts 20 days in the best of conditions. So once you get meat, you definitely want to get cooking pretty early on. You put it into a crock, you seal it, then you can get it to last them more than a year. Wine is incredibly nice. This wine right here is already a couple years old and has another 7 or so years left. However, it is very poor on nutrition. If we go and take a bowl, you'll notice it only gives us 80 saturation for 1 liter, and these can only hold 50 liters at a time. So if you make an entire barrel of wine, it will only fill your food bar a couple of times. However, it does have one of the added effects. If you drink too much, your screen kind of starts going everywhere and your guy will start to get drunk. It'll be harder to see, and it's just really funny in general. You'll definitely be getting drunk a lot if you plan on living off of wine, that's for sure. Okay, so now I gotta wait for this to go away. I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I'm back. This is another cooking item that you might want. It's called a fruit press. We're gonna be getting into this in a bit, and it allows you to press fruit into buckets, which you can put into barrels to make this wine. So if this is something that you're going for, then you might want to get yourself one of these. The last cooking item that you're probably going to want is a clay oven. This can also be a bit expensive, especially at the start. It's made just like anything else, like the bowls and stuff, but can only be made with fire clay. But this thing is so incredibly worth it. It's how you make bread and pies, which I encourage you not to sleep on. I didn't mess with bread and pies for such a long time because I thought it was more complicated than it was, but as it turns out, it's insanely easy and probably one of the best food sources of the game. So go ahead and make yourself a clay oven. Now, right before we get to cooking, I just wanted to show you one last winter prep thing. Hides. They're insanely nice and can be used for a lot of things, but what we want to use them for is making some fur clothes. All you do with the hides is you oil them up with some fat in your crafting bar. It doesn't need to be huge hides. It can be large, it can be medium, it can even be small. However, hunting down the small animals is almost never worth it, so odds are you're going to be using one of these. For these, what you can do is you can just leave them in your inventory. You can drop them into a chest. You can throw them on the ground, but you just gotta let them sit and cure for a little while. And once they're done curing, you'll get pelts. Pelts cannot perish. Hides can. So if you do get hides, you want to throw them into a cellar. Keep them fresh. Try to use them. They're also great for leather armor, which is what you'll be seeing me use pretty much every single time I play. However, they're also great for keeping you warm, which is why we're trying to make a fur coat, fur boots, and fur gloves. What you do with the fur pelt once you got it is you throw it into your hotbar. If you press H on it, you can see what you can make with it, and then you can click on it and it'll give you the recipe. As you can see, this is how you make it with small pelts, large pelts, medium pelts, and huge pelts. You just take your knife, you throw it next to it, and it's really just that easy. You can throw it on top for the boots, you can throw it on the other side for some gloves. And if you're trying to use any of these, just follow along the recipe. By the way, if you don't hover over it, you can see that some of the items are changing. Like you can use a knife for shears, a ruined dagger, so just give it a second, let it cycle through its options. But yeah, once you get these, you'll be way better off for the winter. And the last things I have to show you for the winter prep is that being in a room helps your heat. This I in fact know is a room, but it's a cellar. Cellars can only be 7 by 7, should be made with something like cobblestone. If you throw wood onto the wall, it will actually make your food spoil quicker. Same thing goes for a lot of the materials, so just be warned, if you try to make it all fancy, there's a good chance that you'll be hurting your food. But to keep warm, you're gonna want a room like this, and there's a way for you to find out if it's a room. You can type this command into your chat, /debug rooms high. You can see that everything is highlighted green, which is showing that this in fact is a room. This also works with something like greenhouses, cellars. However, if for some reason that you're not in a room, you'll see that it starts glowing red. The reason why this is in a room is because I don't have a block right here. So you should try this out in your house, make sure everything's all good, and if you see it glowing red, then maybe you have some issues. Later on, once you want to get rid of this, you just type in unhigh instead, and it gets rid of that. But yeah, that wraps it up for the winter prep, other than the food itself. So we're gonna get into that now. One of the main things that you're gonna need is fuel, so a bunch of firewood. Make sure to have your fire pits, make sure to have all your cooking utensils, and of course your food ready. So for some basic food cooking, you can cook stuff right onto the fire pit. However, it's not amazing, and you should avoid it if you can. However, something like the raw bushmeat cannot be cooked into these pots. No stews, nothing. You just gotta cook it straight on the fire, and it's a pretty solid short-term food if you've harvested it from a bear or something. However, what you can do is you can throw it into a barrel. It is 2 to 1, so 2 salt to 1 bushmeat. You seal it, and in 20 days, you can get cured bushmeat, which in this case would last 4.5 years. But it's pretty bad at filling you up. You can also do this with red meats, poultry, fish, and it all works the same. So if you want to do this, you can. However, it's not one of the best food sources you can look into. Some of our bushmeat is done. You can see that this gives 100 satiation, whereas the cured meat over there would have only given us 80, which doesn't sound that bad. However, neither of these are good. By the way, you can also cook most things right onto the fire, like if you just want some cooked red meats. You can do that with the fish or the poultry. However, I recommend that very early on, you look into making a cooking pot, and we can start getting some real food up and going. With a cooking pot, you can start to make stews. If you want, you can do an entire red meat stew, or you can start removing some of the options and place like a turnip. It'll give you a little bit less food, but now you'll start getting some vegetable nutrients. You cannot make a stew with 1 meat and 1 turnip. However, you can do a stew with 2 meat and 1 turnip. But this being said, you can't do it with 2 turnips and 1 meat. If you do a combination of vegetables and meat, you have to have more meat. But what you can do is you can actually just make a whole vegetable stew. And of course, you can always mix vegetables, and it doesn't matter what order they go in. And you can also add fruit to this as well. So this right here would progress 3 of my bars here. Something that we can also do is make some porridge. We add 2 grains to the pot, and we can make a flax porridge here. However, you can use any of the grains. But we can also add honey to make a honey top flax porridge. We can also add some sort of vegetable or either some sort of fruit. However, meat does not work in porridge. I just wanted to show you something real quick as well. With the honey, I have it in a bowl, and I can left click into the pot. A bowl can do 0.1 liter at a time, and I can right click to get it back. However, you can use something like a jug. Get some honey, and you can place it up to 0.3 liters at a time, and get it back that way as well. And a bucket can take 10 liters, and it puts it in 1 liter at a time. So if you're trying to make bulk, you definitely can do that. With the potted food, you can make 6 servings at a time. A crock can only hold 4 unless it's modded. So you can see that this can actually make more than what this can hold. So what you would normally do is cook up 2 fire pits, and that would give you 3 crocks worth. Or you can always cook up 4 servings at a time by removing some. If you've done some husbandry like me, you might have some chickens. And if you do, there's a good chance that you might have some eggs. You can pick up the eggs, and you can throw them into your pot and make some scrambled eggs. And of course, you can always throw in vegetables, but you can't add fruit this time. If you did have cheese, you can also add cheese to this. If you have the ability to make cheese, then you're probably not watching this video, which is why I'm not going to be covering it here today. Cheese is one of the most expensive foods to get, one of the hardest to make, and it takes the longest to make. And it's not that much more worth it than any of the other food, other than trying to get the nutrients from it. If you'd like to see how to make it, I'd be happy to do another video on it. But for now, we're pretty much done with the potted food. It's very simple, as you can see, and I'm sure by now you know exactly how to do it. Let's move on to bread. For bread, you're gonna need to have some grains. There's 6 kind of grains here, and some of them are harder to find than the others, but something like rye, flax, and spelt are insanely easy to find and mass produce. You can see that flax is actually the worst of them to work with because it only gives you half of the satiety. So if you're going to be making bread, I recommend you stay away from that and use the flax grain to feed your animals. However, it's not that big of a deal if you do cook bread with it, to be honest. You'll just have to eat more. Once you've gotten your grain from doing some farming, you should bring it over to a quern. You don't have to automate it. You can just hold right click onto it if you want. But if you do have automation, it makes it a lot nicer. You just throw it in and it'll slowly turn it into flour. To turn the flour into bread, you take a bucket, you right click some water, you add it into your inventory with the flour, and you see you get flax dough. So what you need to do first is go up to your clay oven, fill it with firewood, and you light it. You'll notice that the heat will slowly rise, which is exactly what we're going for. Right now, all we gotta do is wait for the firewood to burn up, and when we see it's gone, we know we're ready to cook. And there we go, it's ready to cook. All we have to do is take our flax dough, we throw it in there. It can take 4 at a time, and now we can watch it. Over time, we'll notice it change color, and we can see it grow. You can take it out at any time, and depending on how cooked it is, it will lose or gain nutrients. Right now, it is part baked, and you can see right here, it'll give 70 saturation, and isn't the best. Right there, it is fully cooked, and it'll give it 160 saturation, so more than double. But we can let it cook even longer, and let it char, and there we go. That will give us 100 saturation. However, it is not useless. The partly baked bread will last for 9 days. The fully cooked bread will last for 14 days, but the charred bread will last for 31 days, a little bit more than double. And if we bring it into the cellar, it's 1.8 years to 3 years to 6.5 years. So in a lot of cases, it is completely worth to burn it. However, that being said, that is not the only thing that we can do with it. You're gonna need a table. They're very cheap, just require some boards, and you can place it pretty much anywhere. The reason why we need that is because we cannot place the bread on any other surface, but we can onto a table. And that makes a pie crust. What you can do with it is you can fill it up completely. Right here I used meat, but you can use vegetables or fruits. I believe you can also use cheese. After it's done, you place another bread on top, which at this point you can in fact cook it, but you can use your bread again, and you can add a fancy pattern to it. I also want to mention that you cannot mix and match different kinds of foods. So if you add one meat, you gotta fill it with meat. Same thing with any of the other kinds. Once your pie is done, you just go and throw it into the oven and cook it the same way that bread is made. They give an insane amount of food, and it's giving more than 3,800 satiation. Now to eat the pie, you gotta throw it on the ground. You take a knife, any knife will do, and you just right click it. It'll give you 4 slices. You can see each of them give about 960 and is an amazing food source. So we're done with the basic food items, and I figured I would show you guys how to make some wine. It is incredibly easy and requires you to have a barrel ready and a fruit press with a bucket. And of course, some berries. All you do with the berries is you go up to the fruit press, you can control click onto it, you right click the fruit press, and it'll slowly squeeze out all the berries into the bucket. But after you're done with it, you can right click the berries right here, and it'll give you a puck of whatever berry you were using. This cannot be eaten by you, however it can be useful still. You can throw it into your container, let it rot out. It's pretty decent for rot. Or if you have animals, you can just throw it into their trough and let them eat away. It's basically a free food source for them. So after we squeezed it out, we can grab the barrel, and you can see it's 10 liters of cranberry juice. It is only fresh for 93 days. And if we grab a bowl, we can see it'll give you 200 satiation. You can also use your jug on it if you want and carry it around and drink it up. If we put it back, then we can pour it into a barrel. You can see that now it's going to be fresh for 93 days. And what you can do is you can fill it up to 50, or in this case, we're just going to do 10. You click seal, and in 7 days, it will convert into wine. Now there is a distillery if you want, and you can turn all this wine into harder alcohols, or you can even make mead or aquavite. However, I don't think most people are going to be doing that. It's basically the same with cheese, that it requires so much work, and nobody is going to be using that as an actual food source. Wine is already cutting it. So if you want a dedicated video on that, I will go into it. But for now, we're going to leave it there. I will mention you can use aquavite and mix it with some bandages to make some of the best healing in the game. However, that being said, it has a shelf life. It does not last forever. So unless you're having trouble with the boss, it really isn't necessary, especially saying that the bosses are not very difficult anyway. But if you want to go into that, that is an option. Now I do have one more food to show you guys, and it's the jam. Jam is insanely nice, and it lasts a crazy amount of time, which is another knock against making wine and stuff, because you can just use the berries for the jam, which is much more worth it in my opinion. So jam is insanely easy to make. All it requires you to do is have 0.4 liters of honey to 2 berries, and you get 1 serving of jam. You can use any of the other berries as well, and it really is just that simple. And once you cook it up, you'll get yourself a crock of jam, which is a wonderful backup food, and it'll practically last you forever. Which is why I recommend that you get yourself a giant bee farm up and going. I do have a video on bee farms if you'd like. If you do get yourself one, you'll practically have an infinite food supply of jam on top of the wax to seal the jam, and any of the other crocks that you might have. And I haven't mentioned it yet, but you actually can eat the honey. It doesn't spoil. However, it's not amazing and it's a bit expensive. You don't get the wax, but it is an option if you're looking for one. So anyway, guys, I hope this helps some of you. Cooking is an integral part to this game, and anybody can do it. So that being said, thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you next time.